11:42 is the time here, WHIP Radio in Philadelphia. We're getting you ready for the big game tomorrow night that you can hear on this station with coverage starting at 6:30. It's the number one team in the country. Villanova coming to the Liacouras Center to play the Temple Owls. And now joining us is a man that really needs no introduction. You know him here in Philadelphia for winning that 1985 national championship game with the Villanova Wildcats. Now doing a great job at Kaiser University, and that's Coach Rollie Massimino. Coach, Zach Gelb here in Philly. Thanks for a few minutes, and how are you?
Fine, thanks. Golly, I remember you when you were a baby, Mr.
Well, that was actually my father. He produced your basketball broadcasts.
I remember you were a kid then.
Really? I met you when I was a kid?
Yep, when you were a kid. I've known your father a lot of years. He's done a great job.
Yeah, well, that's one of the first guests that we've ever had on that had anything positive to say about him, Coach. I have to ask you, though, you're still coaching at the age of 81. You had a big win last night, 80-57, 25-3 overall at Kaiser. Just tell me a little bit about your team before we talk a little Temple and Nova.
Well, we have a very, very good defensive team that's played well. We're number one in the country in a couple of categories, and we're playing for first place tomorrow night. We're in first now, so we have to continue to sustain the opposition coming in. But I'm very excited about this team. We have a chance to go to the national tournament, and if we do, I think we have a chance to really make some noise. So I'm very happy with it. We have a Philadelphia kid named Stanley Whitaker, who's done a wonderful job for us.
I was reading a story a few days ago. It was an article from about like 2 years ago that said you once went to a Bobby Bowden practice at Florida State and you called up to him as he was on the tower. How much longer are you going to be doing this? And he yelled back down to you, when I fall off the tower. It's just something special that you're still able to coach at this really age of 81. Just where does that passion come from that the game's never gotten old for you?
Well, it hasn't gotten old because I love the kids. They've changed a little bit, but it's been a lot of fun. Coaching is coaching. Coaching is teaching. And when you're a teacher all these years, you really try to instill some philosophy, some growing up things that the kids have to learn in this day and age, and hopefully some stick to the wall.
We're spending a few minutes with Rollie Massimino, who joins us right now on the hotline. Coach Dunphy was talking about that 1988 game between you and Cheney when Temple was number one yesterday at the end of his practice. Temple won the game by a score of 98-86, but people still talk about that game in Philadelphia all the time, calling it the best Big Five game that there ever was. What do you remember from that game going up against John in 1988?
Oh, it was a wonderful experience. John, did a great job, and now Freddie took over. He's done a wonderful job also. And that particular game was a packed house at McGonigal Hall. I'll never forget it. The shooting was outstanding, and the defense was good to go along with the great shooting. But as the game progressed, we really, really went tooth and nail, as well as John's team, and it was a fun game to be involved with.
We just celebrated the 60th anniversary of the Big Five, and I got a chance to talk to Steve Lapis before the game, and you know Steve pretty well. And he was saying the thing that makes the Big Five so special is, yes, we're all adversaries, but we have a close relationships with the coaching in the Big Five just because of the proximity of all the schools. What was your relationship like with Coach Cheney when you coached?
Very, very good. In fact, we used to not rent ourselves out, but people would raise money for charity, and John and I would go cook. John would bring some African American dishes, and I'd bring some Italian dishes, and we'd share the wealth and raise money for charity. We had a lot of fun together. He was one of my dear friends when I was in Philadelphia. I thought he was just a great person, and love him. I understand now he's starting to play golf, which is great. he's starting too late because he was a heck of an athlete.
He was actually at the Liacouras Center on Sunday. They were honoring his Elite Eight team, and Mark Macon came out, and then no one gets an ovation here at Temple University like Coach John Chaney. It was something special to see. But let me take you back to planning for a John Chaney team. What was the toughest part when you had to coach up against John Chaney and prepare for his squad?
Well, because he played the multiple defenses, and he did some things that were very unusual on the defensive end. And when he ran that high stack offense, he got the ball inside, and of course he had a terrific player in Mark Macon, who really took over the game, and it was a pleasure to watch his team play, and it was a pleasure to compete against John. You know, the Big Five coaches were terrific back in those days as well as today.
Taking you back to that 85 team that won the national championship, every year when March Madness comes around, everyone's still talking about that team whenever there's a big game between a high seed and a low seed. Just after all these years, what still stands out about your national championship team to you?
Well, chemistry really stood out, and the fact that we were a very good defensive team, and again, defense wins championships, and a good point guard and foul shooting wins championships. You got to have that. And our kids shot really well, and I think that defensively we played extremely well with the multiples that we try to play.
A big turning point, and I was able to go back last night and watch the game on YouTube, was what happened with Chuck Everson at the end of the half. And, Coach, you were very animated headed into that locker room. I've always wondered, what did you say to your team at half when after the incident with Chuck Everson happened?
Well, it's just like when you have children. When you have children, you don't want anyone to touch your children, especially attack them in certain ways. And, you know, with us, it's always been family. With Jay, it's always been family. And the fact is that when we got down on the defensive stance, it was all about we, not about us. And when someone touched him, even though he's a big guy, he's a very important part of what we try to do.
You guys played with tremendous confidence, and maybe that's because you were very familiar with Georgetown. You played them twice that year before the championship game and lost by 2 and 7 points. How'd you get your players to believe, though, that they could beat Georgetown that night?
Well, because of one person, namely Eddie Pinckney. Eddie Pinckney loved to play against Patrick. And the fact remained is that they competed for 4 years against each other, and you know, at times Patrick would get the upper hand, and at times Eddie would get the upper hand. And it made for a very, very competitive kind of game. So we played well, they played well. Harold Jensen really shot the ball extremely well. And Harold Presley played extremely well. And Dwayne McClain, who was the leading scorer of the game, hadn't missed a foul shot, you know, until the very end of that Georgetown game.
And your team was 22 of 28 from the field that night. It's tough to play the perfect game in basketball, but do you think you played the perfect game that night?
Well, no, I don't know if you call it perfect because we had 17 turnovers, but we played an outstanding defensive game and a very confident kind of game. It didn't matter who we were playing. We knew that we were the underdog. We knew that we were playing one of the best teams in the country or of all times, and we hung in there because we played them very well. The first game we played at the center down there in Philadelphia, at the Spectrum, I'm sorry, and then we played them very well down in Georgetown.
Another interesting part when just taking a look back at that season was later on in the regular season, you played Pitt and you pulled your starters, everyone knows, in the second half. How much did that really just spark a fire in your players and really help your team get to their end goal at the end of the year?
Well, you know, I mean, everyone has goals, and our goal, you know, was to make the NCAA tournament, and you know, we had lost our last regular season game to Pitt, And the first game we played in the Big East was Pitt, and we did a fine job and won that game. And then we played St. John's, and they beat us with Chris Mullen, and we weren't sure whether or not we'd get in. And the opportunity to get in and to really expose the talent that we had made it even more spectacular.
Being a kid that grew up in Long Island from New York, there was nothing better than the Big East tournament and going to Madison Square Garden, skipping school, and seeing those games being played. But now the Big East isn't what it once was with the amount of turnover and changing of conference that you've seen in college basketball. When you've seen a school like a Syracuse or other schools that have left the conference depart, just how upsetting was that to you, being a coach that coached in the Big East for so many years?
Well, obviously it was a little disappointing seeing the Big East kind of dissipate a little bit, but it's called changing times. You know what I mean? Certain people have to do what they have to do in terms of their programs, and because of changing times, they reconstructed different leagues around the country, and people have to do what's important for them.
Wrapping up with Rollie Massimino, who joins us right now. With Jay Wright, you've known him a very long time. He's been along with you for many years in his coaching career. Just what stood out to you about Jay when you first met him and elected to put him on your staff?
Well, he's an outstanding young man and an outstanding coach. We hired him, and he was an assistant, and he ran the camps for us, and he just has a terrific mind, and he's always believed in family, and that was something that was important to me when I hired him. And the fact that he has been so successful, I'm so proud of him and all our guys that have been part of our program at Villanova.
And now they're the number one team in the country. They play Temple coming up tomorrow night. Jay Wright's trying to win a national championship, though, just like you did for Villanova. He's got to the Final Four before. But do you think this could possibly be the year that Jay Wright brings a championship back to Villanova?
Well, it'd be great if he could, but we can't put any pressure on him because he's won a plethora amount of games over the years. He's done a great job. Don't forget he won the league last year, Coach of the Year, and he continues every year to recruit good players. He continues every year to establish the family concept of what it's all about and brings back a host of players to celebrate the program that they all played in.
How much do you still get to watch Villanova? I know you're still coaching.
Every time I can.
Well, Rollie, we know you got to get on with your day, and you have a lot to do in preparation for that big game tomorrow as you're still coaching. So we appreciate a few minutes, and it's great to talk to you.
Well, thank you. I wish I was up there. It would be a fun game to watch. And by the way, Fran Dunphy's another great coach. He's another dear friend. We talk all the time, and I really respect that program and what he's done to carry on after John Chaney made it also. And, of course, back then, with Don Casey and with all the people that have been a part of Temple University. And Al Schreier, who was one of my dear friends. Temple's always been dear to my heart as well as Villanova. Thank you so much, and God bless everyone.
Have a good one. There's Rollie Massimino joining us on the hotline, WHIP Radio in Philadelphia. And for those of you that don't know, in the beginning of the interview, when he said he met me as an infant, I didn't even know that with Rollie Massimino. But my dad actually produced his radio show, his weekly radio show with Steve Fredericks. And I believe it was WCAU. That was the station. So we'll take a quick break right now. We're getting you ready for Temple and Villanova that comes your way tomorrow night.